Okay. Hello, out and abouters, YouTubers, Facebookers, Tweeters, and all members of my social media family, and anyone else who's in biological family, and brothers and sisters in Christ, and anybody else that is going to be under the sound of my voice and hear this review. It is Monday afternoon, July 29th, and this is my movie review for the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This review is going to be posted on my Out and About blog. It's also going to be on my YouTube page and pretty much everywhere else that I have a social media account in order to let people hear it. And it's also going to be on my Anchor podcast as well, and Jeanette Speak. So, the release date for this film was July 26, 2000. I'm too used to saying 2019, and the budget on the I wound up going to see it a day later, which is the 27th. The budget for this film was $90 to $96 million. Their box office on it was $16.9 million as of the 27th when I went to see it. Since then, I looked at it on the 28th, which was yesterday, and I looked again today, and the box office on it now is at like 40. So they have kind of doubled what they had brought in. Still, anyway, the movie is considered to be comedy drama. It was written and directed, or is written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, one of my favorite directors. The main characters are Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. And actually, once you get into the film, you'll see that it's an all-star cast. You'll see a whole lot of famous faces. In fact, one of the characters was the little girl from Big Bang Theory that Sheldon tried to talk to in the library. So I even recognized her. Anyway, the setting is 1960. This movie is set in 1969 Hollywood. There was a couple of things happening there. There was the end of, what we call old Hollywood glamour, because the counterculture movement had started happening at that time. It was also really kind of the end of the counterculture too, because counterculture, I looked it up, started in like 1960 and kind of lasted all the way until 69. And if you watch any movies about counterculture, around 69, that's when things started being less about free love and a whole lot of really, really shady, bad characters. The drugs started taking their toll on people, and it was just not a really good time for even that movement. So this film, I didn't find out until I saw it, is a example of alternative history. So alternative history is a genre of fiction in which one or more historical events occur differently in the film than what they actually occurred in real life. And it really consists of a what if scenario, like what if this happened and that didn't happen. So happened to cause this not to happen, just basically changes the outcome. And in this case, avoid some pretty tragic events. So in this case, the historical event involves the infamous Tate LaBianca murders, or also known as the Manson family killings. And I found out in my research that Charles Manson had not only the Manson family weren't just responsible. These were the two most famous cases. And they say Tate because in the first people that they killed actress Sharon Tate, who was married to Roman Polanski at the time, and several of her friends, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, hairstylist Jay Sebring, were amongst some of the people, and one of her husband's friends were some of the people who got murdered at that setting. And I can't remember if they counted her pregnancy or not, because many times if you kill a pregnant woman, if she's very far along, and I think she was probably was very close to her due date. She was third trimester, so she was about 8 to 9 months pregnant. Very pregnant. In many cases, they will count the unborn baby as you taking a life as well. So they didn't just kill her, they killed her unborn baby. And pretty gruesome murders at that. And they also went to, and I think about a day or two later, they went to the LaBianca family and murdered them. And murdered some people at their house. And so that's all I'm gonna say. That's just to give you some background on the events that they're doing alternative history on. And that's all I'm gonna say on that, because I don't want to put a spoiler in here. So some facts about the movie. This was one of the first films that Mr. Tarantino made after cutting ties with the Weinstein Company, following sex abuse allegations against Harvey Weinstein, one of the owners. I think he owned it with his brother. So I did some further research on that, and it turns out that he had to confront him a few times himself because of his behavior towards some of the actresses that worked on some of Mr. Tarantino's films. This was also the last film to feature Luke Perry before he passed away. Many of you remember him from 90210, and some of you, if you're younger, remember him as one of the fathers on Riverdale, the show Riverdale. So, because this is alternative fiction, many of the characters in this film are based on real life people. So now the plot, Leonardo DiCaprio plays a aging actor named Rick Dalton, who is a former star of a hit TV series from the 1950s. So his character is trying to stay relevant in the movie business. So he's, trying to keep it together. As you know, if you know anything about the entertainment industry, getting old and looking old, you can get old all day long as you don't look old. But once you begin to show your age, so that's one of the reasons why so many actors and actresses do a lot of plastic surgery and everything, because they're trying to kind of keep from aging badly. So his character is modeled after people like Tab Hunter, singer Fabian, probably a few actors out of Bonanza like Michael Landon and different ones that were very popular, but definitely a lot of leading men during that time period that were very popular in the late 50s, early 60s, and then about a decade later, which is 69, are still trying to remain relevant in the business. And, he's still a working actor, as you'll see in the film. He's still a working actor, but those parts that he used to get when he was younger, kind of fall off as you get older. So, Brad Pitt plays his stunt double and best friend, Cliff Booth. And he's modeled after, his character was modeled after a character in the film called Billy Jack. And Billy Jack was a famous, really famous movie from the 70s, which is where Quentin Tarantino pulls a lot of his energy for the movies that he makes. They're kind of tributes to a lot of the 70s exploitation, blaxploitation, action films that were around during that time. Billy Jack was actually a pretty good film, at least to me anyway. It's, basically about racial tensions in a town between Native Americans and whites that lived in that town. So the two of them have what many people call a bromance. And a bromance is when two men are really, really close friends. The Bible even elaborates to David having a bit of a bromance with one of Saul's sons, I think Jonathan. How their love for each other surpassed even the love that a man would have for a woman. But they are still straight. So this is not a homosexual union. A lot of people would liken it to them acting like an old married couple. They just really, really care about each other, just really close friends. So and to the point where, the Brad Pitt character, Cliff Booth, will drop Leonardo's characters off at work and then come home and take care of the household like he's his wife or something, and help him out around his house. Now, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper into Brad Pitt's character in a little bit, but that's kind of just letting you know the gist of their story. Now, the backstory, which is what I found kind of intriguing from looking at the trailer, like I said, involves Sharon Tate, and who was played by actress Margaret Robbie, who is from Queensland, Australia. Now, I think she's starred in a few things, but she's relatively new, so I've heard of her name, but I don't know of anything that I remember that she's been in. And now, like I said, she played Sharon Tate, and Sharon Tate's husband, Robert Polanski, who was played by a Polish actor named Rafał Rucha. And so in this film, they live right next door to Leonardo's character, Rick Dalton. And Rick Dalton is hoping to meet with Polanski and be able to work together so he can kind of restore himself to being the leading man again. So he's, he elaborates on that in the film as well. So, some interesting tidbits on the two main characters. Dalton and Booth, who are fictionalized characters, are based on real life actor Burt Reynolds and his stunt double Hal Needham, both who are deceased now. Burt Reynolds just recently passed last year in 2018, and Mr. Needham passed away in 2013. Burt was actually supposed to play the role of George Spahn, who is a real-life character. George Spahn housed the Manson family, and he also had passed away. He passed away in 1974. But actor Bruce Dern, who was also a Hollywood veteran, wound up playing the part instead, and did a really good job. Everybody was good in their roles. Mr. Needham, the character that Brad Pitt's character was based on, wrote Smokey and the Bandit, and also helped create and direct Cannonball Run, two very famous Burt Reynolds movies that went on to do really good. To me, I would have liked to see more of that, but I recognize they only have so much time when they're making a film. So, George Spahn, who was the guy who owned the ranch that the Manson family lived on, he had nothing to do. They investigated the Spahn Ranch. The Spahn Ranch was, let me see here. So the Spahn Ranch was actually a very famous Hollywood set at that time. Mr. Spahn rented out for westerns like The Outlaw and Bonanza, and a B movie called The Creeping Terror. So it actually, because when I looked at pictures of it, I said that looks like something out of the show Bonanza, and it turns out I was right. They actually did use his ranch to make a lot of the old Hollywood westerns that you see. And so, and like I said before, he died in 1974. So the site is now part of it. There was a wildfire on it that destroyed like the film sets, the residential structures, and all of that there. But there are parts of it that are still left and are now part of the Santa Susana Pass State Historical Park. So the parts that survived the wildfires, people are still able to go and tour. So it makes for it probably be an interesting tour. Now he was famous for other things, but he had ties to the Manson family because he allowed them to live there in exchange for sex with the female Manson family members, labor, chores, and they helped run his horse rental business, which he rented out horses for people to ride and all of that stuff too. So when they committed the Tate LaBianca murders, they were staying with him at the time, and it turns out that Charles Manson was also responsible for the murder of one of his hired hands. So, when all of this stuff was going down, but they never tied Mr. Spahn himself to any of the action that any of the actions or things that the Manson family committed on his, committed or hatched while they were living with his property. And like I said, keep in mind, Manson was a bit of a pimp, and not in a good way, in the bad, exploitive, abusive way of what we think of as a pimp. So he was able to barter all of that. So basically, he abused his members sexually. Wasn't a pretty picture. So after all of that, now I'm going to get to my review of the movie. The good points was there were, like I said, an all-star cast. If you go for movies that where you get to see a lot of famous faces and everything, and really kind of a point that a trademark of the Quentin Tarantino film is that you will see people, which I kind of like this. I mean, I've seen it even, in black films that I've been through. Many times, the people whose acting that inspired the director and writer will wind up getting parts in the movie. And so it was an all-star cast, basically of all ages. Okay, so you were subject to see a lot of people pays homage to old Hollywood, which is another excellent point. I thought it was a really good, and this is not a bag against Leonardo DiCaprio or Brad Pitt's age or anything, which I looked up their ages, like Brad Pitt, which I already knew Brad Pitt was close to my age. I didn't realize he was, he's a little bit older than Leonardo DiCaprio, but I thought it was pretty cool that they are like both at midlife, and so this was a film that was basically about that stage in a man's life, period. And there's been a lot of studies and everything that talk about men at midlife, so this was like an appropriate film for them, and especially because it's talking about aging in Hollywood. The acting, everybody's acting was really good. I have no complaints about anyone's parts. They all played their parts really well. I was encouraged. This is going to sound strange, but every so often there will be something in a movie that really kind of makes me feel good about that movie. And one of them was them showing people reading books. Because in this day and age where we have all kinds of different ways to read a book, to see, people reading actual books. Books are, if you are a follower of mine, I have a book, I have a blog called Bookworm that is dedicated to everything books. So it was very encouraging to see everyone in their spare time when they're in between taping and whatever else, reading books. I also was encouraged to see the Cliff Booth character played by Brad Pitt turning down sex with a underage girl, because at one point, and he's offered the ability in this day and age. We keep hearing all these scandals with different people indulging with people that really they're not old enough to be indulging with. It was cool that they had a scene in there where he turned down the opportunity to get next to somebody that was way too young to be, he had enough street wisdom about him that he recognized, you're not old enough for me to be doing anything with, so no thank you. So that was, a pretty good point. I know this has nothing to do with storyline or quality of the film, just something that I liked seeing in there. So, now let me get to, and I'll say this about the acting. One of the things I read, and I don't know if this is true for all actors or not, but that one of the most difficult things is to play an actor playing an actor. So in the film, Leonardo DiCaprio, who is an actor, is playing an actor who is acting, and because he's on a movie set, and he's acting, doing the character's job, which is acting. And so the scenes where he is, the character is plying his trade and taping and all of that stuff there, where they're actually filming, are so engaging that you forget, because this is a Western, you forget that you are really only watching somebody playing an actor doing his trade. You think you're in another movie. So that the Western scenes were really, really good. Now on to what I wasn't real crazy about, and that was, it was very slow moving, especially for a Tarantino film. And the reason why I say, there really wasn't a whole lot of action until the Brad Pitt character, Cliff Booth, had a run-in with the Manson family at the Spahn Ranch. And like I said, the Spahn Ranch really actually exists. And, that one of the things it unfortunately got famous for was being the place where the Manson family lived. And so to explain what I mean by Tarantino-style films, usually they're very focused and high energy. The graphic violence was there. Non-linear or disruptive narrative, which means usually a lot of flashbacks or dream sequences. The events are not always in chronological order. But that's usually not a takeaway with his films, because his films are the type of films that you kind of have to see from the beginning in order to keep up, but it usually doesn't take away from the narrative. Usually some humor, and usually very all over the top characters. I also thought that they could have done a better job of casting Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was a Asian actor. I remember most of the films that I remember from him was late 60s, early 70s, on into the 70s until his death, because he's now deceased. The actor, to me, I thought they could have found another actor, because Bruce Lee, if you're a Bruce Lee fan like I was, Bruce Lee was a very good-looking, very well-built man, and this guy was a little on the skinny side and not as handsome as Bruce was. Other than that, in fact, I didn't even recognize this movie as a Tarantino until things started to get, well, I think one scene kind of gave it away for me, and that was the scene that had Zoe Bell. And Zoe Bell, if you know anything, is a famous stunt woman, and she made an appearance in Quentin Tarantino's Grindhouse 2, as a matter of fact, because she was one of the women in the second Grindhouse movie. And she played herself. She played a stunt woman even in that. So I recognized her. I'm like, oh, is this a Tarantino film? I'm like, oh Lord. And so, knowing what I just described before, this film to me was not characteristic of what I usually expect going to see a Quentin Tarantino film. So those were takeaways to me. The musical score could have been a little more reflective of the time period. If you know anything, we were discussing it, and I was just like, we were just like, how is it that you make a film during that time period and no black artists in being played? And that's one of the things that's characteristic of his movies, is that usually there's a really good musical score. Not it was good music, but it wasn't reflective of all the music that usually is representative, and especially for this time period, because we're talking about post Motown. So Motown was a factor, and a lot of black artists, kind of were present. A lot of black artists, very popular, especially for that time period. Because before that, you almost had to go the Chitlin Circuit or whatever to see any of us. So, the fact that we were kind of closed out of this film, not real good. So, my rating for this, now one of the things that I noticed, and this is neither a plus or a minus, to me the film almost reminded me a little bit of Forrest Gump, where he keeps showing up and meeting really key figures at each period, and he just goes on, he just comes and keeps brushing shoulders with all of these famous people at very famous time periods and different things. Now, I think a lot of that had to do with they wanted to give the audience a real feel, because this is based on two characters that were supposed to be key figures in the Hollywood industry, so to make it in the movie industry, so to make it give you a more realistic feel, they went ahead and went that route with it. Anyway, now my conclusion, I felt like there could have been more action toward the beginning of the movie. Like I said, sometimes you can have really great actors, you can have an all-star cast of people who are proficient in their trade, and still, I expected a lot more of it, especially with the Manson family backstory. I expected there to be a little bit more to the main story, and for there to be a lot more going on than there was. I wasn't all that thrilled with it, and especially finding out, because I really didn't know going in. My mom knew that it was Quentin Tarantino, but I didn't. So now that really makes me, because I feel like, being a Tarantino fan, I'm a little bit not spoiled, but bratty, but I have a higher expectation for any film that he makes, because I've liked films that he's made in the past. So this one was a little slow moving. You don't really see, it doesn't really get interesting until the Cliff Booth character runs into the Manson family and everything, and that's when it gets interesting. So my rating for this film, I'm not gonna say don't go see it. I talked to a family member who liked it. I'm not gonna say don't go see it, but I don't think you're gonna miss anything if you wait till it hits Netflix. So anyway, this is Adam's Rib with this movie review. Like I said, I'm not gonna say don't go see it, but I'm also not gonna say I'm also not gonna say I think you should run out. I highly recommend that you run out. I'm not gonna say that either. My rating for it is Netflix. If you wait until it comes on one of your favorite movie streaming services like Google Play or Netflix, you probably won't be sorry that you waited. Anyway, this is Adam's Ribs signing off. You guys be blessed. Have a wonderful week. I probably will be posting again around Wednesday on some of my